for example, if we talk about Blue Anon and the person who tried to assassinate Trump, again, he's kind of like fully committed to a decision. So he had already kind of left his edgelordism in a way, like he shed the skin of an edgelord and he became a fundamentalist who wants to kill someone. And if you remain in the kind of edgelord way of thinking, you do not get to that point where you have such a strong belief as to end someone else's life.
I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Very curious where it will go. To start, I'd love to invite you to just share your background. Who are you and what animates you?
Usually start with, born and raised in Cairo, Egypt. Been formally trained as an architect, technically. I don't know if I'm trained enough. But yeah, before also doing the architecture degree, I did dabble some time with graphic design and stuff like that, and even like high school times, which also was a precursor to kind of like my current online life, where I used to be like on forums and and stuff like that, where I kind of also started doing this creative work as a thing. I had like a YouTube channel. It was this 77th most followed YouTube channel in Egypt back in like 2008 2008.
What was the channel? Sorry to jump in.
Yeah, I used to post like music video edits, like used to create like movie stuff, anime stuff, some of that, some wrestling actually, as the Stone Cold Steve Austin shirt here. But yeah, and then I felt like I was already kind of like freelancing online as a 14-year-old, doing like Photoshop banners for pharmaceutical companies and like some weird stuff. So I was like, if I was gonna do a degree, I'm gonna try something new. Like I didn't want to do a design degree, like another graphic design degree. So yeah, and I went for architecture and I hated it completely. Yeah, and then like maybe around the third year, I met my professor, Tariq Naga, who was a thesis advisor back in the 90s at SCI-Arc, the LA-based architecture rebellious school, quote unquote rebellious. And that's how I basically got introduced to kind of that realm of architecture, which was like more experimental and theoretical and had to do a lot with, narrative building and very adjacent to media studies, adjacent to philosophy, adjacent to a lot of things. And that was kind of like, I don't know if it was intentionally gate-kept or not intentionally gate-kept from us as like students in the university I went to in Egypt. Most of our professors and even the curriculum was led by German professors who were kind of very much in the, still in the Mies van der Rohe school of, where is the fire escape? How big is the toilet kind of architecture? So yeah, and his like Tariq Naga's presence was very felt throughout even the whole school in terms of how like new and thought-provoking it was. And he also had this aura of like, oh, he's coming from America, like he had like a very kind of powerful personality, and like he'd do lectures that fill lecture halls, and a lot of people from other majors would come to see his lectures. His lectures were very kind of accessible in a way, and he had such a charisma, such a an expressive style that was very captivating. It really made architecture cool, like in that sense. And yeah, and I got lucky because he kind of took a special interest in me, and he was kind of super interested in how I think. I mean, this is another anecdote. I was still kind of not fully sold on architecture. I was considering already just dropping out, and I was bored. But when I took his studio, the first kind of like exercise or assignment we were assigned was to we were supposed to design a museum in a place on some island on the Nile, and the first exercise was to go to the site and pick up whatever you can see there and kind of start forming your design concept or design story based on whatever you can find there and take pictures. Just regular. Any architecture student would probably know how boring this sounds. So I didn't go because I was already kind of in the I'm not even bothered kind of mental state. But I had a best friend. Her name is Yomna. She's gonna be happy with the shout out. I told her to just bring me whatever you find there, and I still have the picture. Like she just saw like a pine cone on the floor, and she just took a picture and she was like, "Is this okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, whatever." And I took the pine cone and then I was scheduled with a like a desk crit or a discussion with him like a week later or 2 weeks later, something like that. Of course, I didn't do any work, and then on the day I was like, okay, I need to do something with this pine cone, and I just did some Googling and I made up some bullshit narrative about like how it's part of Cambodian culture originally, and what it has to do with Gnosticism and transcendence. And then I built this whole kind of thing, and I just pitched it, and I went like people usually went to that desk grid with like full made models and like ready kind of drawings and stuff. And I just went there with that pine cone and like maybe 2 small sketches. And yeah, and he completely kind of like obliterated me, but it was a full 2-hour roast, but at the same time it was like my 15 minutes of fame in like a Warholian sense, and in the sense that it was such an engaging discussion for even like other students came and sat down to see, like they came to see the roast, but also because what was being said was intriguing. And then basically what was concluded was he told me like he sees a lot of potential in what I tried to do here, trying to kind of like hack the system or whatever, but he saw like that I can kind of present something out of almost nothing, and that kind of just gave me a lot of maybe belief in myself in a way to kind of explore and see where that goes. And yeah, and then fast forward a month or 2 later, I'm like one of his favorite students. I've been working hard and everything, and he was the one who told me about SCI-Arc. And fast forward 6 or 8 years maybe, and I'm moving to LA and I'm doing my master's at SCI-Arc. And yeah, he sadly passed away last November.
Sorry.
But in terms of like where I come from, I felt like his presence has kind of felt being here in LA, because he lived here 20 years before coming back to Cairo. He came back to Cairo right before the 2011 revolution, and he was just going back to Cairo for like a project, but because of the revolution, he decided to stay. And if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have met him, because we met in 2013. So it all kind of like just connects in very fun, mysterious ways.
Wow.
Yeah, and then now I'm in LA. I got here to do the master's at SCI-Arc at first, and then somehow, somewhere during that time, post manifested. I mean, I was thinking, like, I had the idea of the name before I got here. A lot of it has been somewhat like organic, and I've been like enjoying the process, because also prior to doing the LA thing, I was doing a lot of like extremely commercial work, and in terms of where I started working in brand and creative strategy and all of that stuff. And a lot of my clients are just tech bros, and post was kind of like a break from all the commercial stuff that I had to be doing. Like I couldn't handle just doing another kind of what we call discovery session, which is like a brand thing where we sit down with clients and just drum up all the, ways we can define a brand that no one really believes in at the end of the day.
You're really doing a great job. You're going to get so many clients.
I was just going to say, really hope no one, can we cut this part out? So Post was kind of born from, what I'm witnessing in the world and just living all these internal contradictions and internals. And of course there was maybe some kind of like intellectual rage going on that kind of pushed me to kind of do that. And then the Instagram account happened, which was very much unplanned. It was a way to kind of just like put my ideas out there, see if anyone resonates with the post ideas. It was also like, it started as like a Finsta. Like I had some selfies of myself back there, and back when I had like 150 followers or something. But then when I saw that a lot of people were kind of starting to take interest in the account, and I felt like maybe being anonymous could be more fruitful in a way. And it made me feel freer when I'm posting. Like I felt like I could post more freely when it's not tied to who I am really. Eventually that kind of, faded away, but it's still somehow a thing. Like I'm what I'm calling post enigma. Like I've done like I haven't done like a full official admin reveal, but I've posted like work that I've done that's been featured, like for example on Dazed or Dis or whatever, and all of those feature my real name and everything. So anyone who's actually interested and Googled probably knows who I am, but most of, I think, the follower base are still like unaware of and I kind of enjoy keeping it that way.
Yeah, it's a nice slippery middle space.
Yeah, exactly. Like 2 days ago, I had just someone DMing me, am I speaking to Brad? And I'm like,
oh, like Brad Trammell?
Yeah. And I'm like,
God.
I thought of that, and then I just wanted to make sure, and I was like, no, why would Brad who? And he was like, you just have a similar sense of humor to Brad Troimel. And I was like, okay, thanks. So that's just like how much people are not really paying attention to the idea of like who is behind the account. And I think that's a blessing for me. Like, I even before doing this podcast, I was like, should I worry about, just publishing as like who I am and with like this full admin reveal and everything? And then I felt like I'm not that worried. Like if whatever happens, no one's really going to remember who is the actual admin or whatever.
All right. So you've brought up a lot of different threads that I want to pull.
Sure.
So I think let's just kind of move and see where the conversation goes. I'm thinking about the pine cone moment, and it's reminding me when I was first teaching poetry, one of the lessons that somebody recommended to me that ended up being like the best lesson of the whole semester, arguably it's the best class of the whole semester when you teach, is you task students to write the worst poem they can imagine. Huh. And what that ends up doing, kind of like your roast, is like it forces people to think through like what makes a poem bad, first of all. But then secondly, it now allows the whole class, like the dialogue between the professor and the person being workshopped, but also the whole class also sort of witnessing that in a super safe space.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if there's a similar dynamic there with you going in knowing that you're kind of bullshitting. It's like, I have nowhere to go but down, so I might as well like ham it up. But then also the function of him kind of taking you to task and like treating it like it's real and meaningful and trying to pull out what he's witnessing from you doing that's special. So like, is there any of that in that anecdote?
Yeah, I think absolutely what you said. But I think the only difference is that like I still believe that I could pull this off. Like that's also why I feel like looking back at it feels very naive. But like I don't know, I was too full of myself or whatever. Like I felt like worst case scenario, he's just gonna feel like at least I'm smart or whatever. But he kind of saw through that and understood like I was just like being lazy. But yeah, I guess I did on some level believe in what I was presenting. But yeah, I was maybe just like too consumed with the ideas of hacking the system or whatever, like just like finding a way out without having to do the work, because I'm already might be dropping out anyways, or because I'm not that interested anyways, or because
And so what exactly was boring to you about architecture that then his approach, like you referenced him being philosophical, conceptual, like let's go a little bit deeper on that. Like what was it that really chafed for you? And then what was it that was exciting about working with him?
I think, I mean, usually, and I think this is also pretty common, like most people who get bored of architecture are just exposed to the side that's just like more technical, or, I mean, people who are leaning more towards like the whatever artsy side, or don't enjoy the part where you have to just like keep measuring stuff and, you know, cut cardboard with your hands, and, you know, it gets sometimes a bit too, I don't know, like uninspiring in a way. But looking back at it as well, I think a huge part of it was the curriculum itself was kind of like extremely outdated. So the idea of relevance, I think, is very important in what made me see it as something that's boring. Like I'm always like looking at the world outside, and then looking at what I'm doing, and trying to make sense if what I'm doing is in any way like congruent with what's happening. Like, am I just living in my own bubble, in my own head, or am I like, we exist in the context, you know, to quote Kamala Harris here. But yeah, and that was a big part of it. Like I didn't feel like what I was doing was connecting with me and on that level. Also, I think what you mentioned about, you know, when you were doing the exercise about write the worst poem you can possibly do, I feel this is also such a post idea for me, because it was really part of its philosophy was to kind of go the opposite way and just see what's the worst that could happen kind of scenario. And even one of the post memes that said, it's no longer enough to be bad, you have to be wrong. And and I think it's just like going that extra level of just like complete you know, negative, you know, like because bad can be cool, but wrong usually cannot be cool. So why not kind of like try and take over that area as well, and just like make being wrong cool, you know? That's
well, I mean, because evil people have figured that out. You know? I think of like Jack Posobiec, or like some of these like bad, like far right political actors who have figured out. I mean, Ben Shapiro famously, like people who say things that are very dunkable end up skyrocketing in engagement. And so like they figured out that like being wrong works. You know, you just have to be able to like eat a little crow.
It's about the form, the delivery.
Okay, so you brought up post a few times. But it occurs to me we should sort of start at the beginning.
Right.
What is post?
All right. Yeah. So many answers to the question. There was this way of thinking, especially prevalent in like designers and creative directors, to kind of like borrow like from, you know, historical movements and art movements. And the idea of like history seen as distinct periods is very, especially in architecture, like you have the Renaissance, the, you know, modernism, postmodernism, and whatnot. And I always kind of also low-key had an issue with that. Like I didn't feel like things were that linear, and I also wanted to just investigate that more. And I was I think maybe that was during COVID, like quarantine times. Maybe, actually, no, it could be earlier, maybe 2019. I found out about postmodernism, which is like the 90s new sincerity movement, largely led by David Foster Wallace. It was very influential in the sense of the cultural moment was that we are collectively done with cynicism, and we're done with irony, and we're done with postmodernism, and we're just looking for meaning again, and we're looking for something to make us feel something, and these ideas became somewhat the mainstream culture early 2000s, even 2010s, and maybe even up till like pre-COVID era. Like, Modern Family, the sitcom, BoJack Horseman. It's all about like this post-ironic style where it's yes, we're being ironic and we're making jokes, but it's about arriving at a sincere, wholesome feeling in the end. What I felt like um, wasn't making sense to me back when I was looking into that was how it's very not fitting as like let's say a characterization of the times we're living. Back in 2019, it was 3 years after Trump's election. We were already in the post-truth kind of era, and I look on like this side of discourse, and it's usually people being like very sincere, pro sincerity, pro, and then irony was just still in that kind of no zone. And of course, I'm generalizing, but it felt like that was really the kind of the mainstream way of thinking. Even satire on Trump uh, during his presidency was very much leaning towards that idea of dunking on him in a way that is still about how sincere we are, about how good we are, and it wasn't really engaging on the Trump level of like this extreme kind of chaos. It was still like very fixed in that sense, and that was very reminiscent of the critiques of modernism, of how the belief kind of cements you in like a fixed position that will not allow basically what postmodernism brought, which was like more deconstruction and more um, basically critical thinking.
The way that I sort of frame it, drawing from some of the metamodernism discourse, which we can definitely talk about as well, is like modernism put forwards grand narratives, ideas of like singular genius, things like that. Postmodernism then holds the inverse, which is that there's no such thing as grand narratives, and here are the various tools by which I will dissect and deconstruct.
Yes, exactly. And you mentioned metamodernism as well, which is somewhat synonymous with postmodernism. So metamodernism kind of started as mainly online blogs in maybe early 2000s and still in 2010s. And it was still also about finding some kind of meaning and finding, which is on like a serious level, a very kind of admirable and important part of discourse. But at the same time, from the post perspective, it was really about not taking any of this seriously. So that was kind of what, like, the initial thought was, we're not living in post modern times anymore. It's post. So and just chopping off modernism from the title anyways, because it's no longer relevant to kind of hinge on anyways. And the only way to make this like the silliest kind of proposal is to kind of just like call it something that ridiculous, and just like it wanted it to become this bulletproof vest to sincerity. Like, you cannot take it seriously no matter how much you try. In the context of sincerity and irony, it really embodies the meta ironic space, which is not post ironic, because post ironic aims to arrive at like a fixed position, like at sincerity. Could be a grand narrative, could not be a grand narrative, but like it's just about making a point ultimately. And meta irony is really about existing in that space where you're not taking any position. You're never gonna know if I'm being sincere or if I'm being ironic in that sense. And this is very kind of prevalent in like niche meme communities, and it's like the thing that makes someone like a niche meme creator, that it's just like you're never gonna know like their intention behind a meme or intention behind something, and it's always existing in that space. And also it did have a lot to do with when Gen Z became the kind of mainstream online frontier, like they
And frontline.
yeah, like millennials had their time with the post-ironic stuff, but Gen Z really brought the meta-ironic game, and it was really no longer about making any point or making any sense, and it just rather staying in that space. And people would kind of assume that space is really about avoiding commitment, but I feel like it's a space that really allows a lot more connection and like some very interesting connections happen in that space that wouldn't necessarily happen on the space where everyone has their own kind of fixed position where they don't want to kind of get out of, or
Is that the ambiguity? Like the ambiguity leaves open space?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you find that ambiguity, like, because obviously you are a person who has beliefs, however much of that comes through on post. I want to get to that later. But inevitably, if there is that ambiguity and communities being created, then some folks are going to be responding to something that either is not your intention or is not what you believed. Have you had encounters like that?
Yeah, a lot of similar encounters, because I post all kinds of stuff. Like but I feel like most of my like follower base know when I'm posting something, let's say for example, that's extremely like alt-right. I can post it with like no context, but they would know that I'm not posting this in support,
Right.
But I remember maybe like 3-4 months ago, I was posting something political, kind of like too serious political, in the middle of like a carousel full of like cum jokes and stuff. And I remember in the comments, someone was like, "How dare you post this? People are dying, and you're posting memes beside whatever. You're a meme account. Why are you posting serious stuff?" And I think like 5 or 6 followers just responded to that comment saying, "This is not a meme account. This is not a meme account." So and that was a moment of validation for me, because I've always wanted to use, again, that space of ambiguity to kind of like post whatever I want to post, and in the sense of I can use the cover of like I'm just a meme account, but then when I'm posting stuff that a meme account wouldn't post, I'd be like, I'm not a meme account. So it was a fulfilling moment in terms of hitting that kind of sweet spot that I would say I was a bit deliberate about trying to kind of get to.
This also brings up something, and I recognize that this could take us into some dark territory, and so I want to preface it. I don't mean any of this to be making light of or saying certain things are for the purpose of other things. But what I observed with post is that there's a pre-October 7th post and a post-October 7th post. The approach, the meta-ironic approach, is there throughout. But I feel like at that point, post does take a clear political position. What has that been like, and what was your calculus in that?
In that kind of pre-October 7th and post-October 7th thing, in terms of, let's say, in terms of content, I guess I had always been posting stuff that is related to the Israel-Palestine stuff. That kind of also makes it clear what my position is. It just maybe got more attention after because of, world events and things becoming the conversation. Like, again, when I'm saying that I'm not taking a fixed position, and not necessarily meaning like, because I think it's like my politics have always been very clear. Like on like if anyone follows the account will see like what it's very pro and what it's very against. What I'm saying about not being in a fixed position is where I just always leave an exit, like an emergency exit, where I can just like claim no responsibility for whatever. But again, it's just like about saying the thing without saying it, and in that sense. And even post October 7th, I was posting a lot of, let's say, TikToks from people who are just very pro Israel, and they're just naturally funny because they're so out of touch. They're so out of. This is something also I wrote about in Real Review, Jack Self's publication. I was saying like how humor can really make you tell the difference between like if a meme account is posting, for example, just a screenshot of a tweet by Israel's official account, you know it's a joke. Like it does not require a lot of explanation. Like it's like it's very obvious in a like a metaphysical truth way, you know. and then on if you look at from the other side, if like let's say a right winger is posting like a video of some you know, pro-Palestine person, none of their followers would kind of grasp that level of irony, because it's just like, so he's either going to get, you know, attacked for like, why are you posting that? Or he's going to get like just like straight up hate comments on the thing. So it's like this level of awareness, which is not exclusive to Israel Palestine. It's just like just a left and right thing, you know. It's the right can't meme is holds a lot of you know, truth in it, and in my opinion, because just higher awareness creates like a more kind of layered sense of humor, and that just allows you to kind of navigate things like that. So
is that an audience question? Like, I'm really curious on this idea of like the right can't meme. Also because like Donald Trump was such and continues to be such a meme, like a source of meme content. Yeah. Talk to me more about the right can't meme.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the thing. So this is why Trump is like the king of the game, you know. He embodies the meme. He becomes the meme, not necessarily memeing with like in a removed way from the meme. And that's the thing when people say the right can't meme, it's about the sense of humor of that you feel is really coming from a place of that's too didactic or trying to make a point, and does not have maybe like enough self-deprecation, which comes from like enough self-awareness to kind of deliver or put that out. What I saw was very clear during that time, especially like you could see so many meme accounts just posting, you know, when Israel posted the AI graphics of Voldemort and Hitler and stuff, that didn't need, you know, anything. It was just like so obviously a meme in of itself, but someone who is kind of like very pro that Israel account wouldn't see the joke there, and they would kind of like believe that in their like own sincerity. And that is also how there is that meta ironic space can be created. You're posting. And actually, very funnily, I think I even posted that back when I was so I think October and November were probably the most active I've been on the account, because I was just like constantly on the phone, constantly posting. And I posted, one of the DMs I got was like, I don't get it. Are you pro-Israel or pro-Palestine? and I just screenshotted that and I put it because I think that was kind of again the objective in a way. Like again, nothing that can be held against me that is said in a very kind of clear manner, but it's just like the, I don't know, like edge lording around that makes it gets the point across without having to say it. You're just it's not the what, it's the how kind of thing. Yeah.
What is the value of that type of posting? And the reason that I want to ask it is I think some people would see that. Like, I remember some of the stuff you posted, particularly during that time, but even still now, is stuff that I appreciate having seen, but I have this like full body cringe when I see it. Like, thinking about some of the, like, you know, bodies of folks with IDF soldiers, you know, celebrating and dancing and stuff like that. I wouldn't have known that those particular things were happening had you not posted them, because of the way algorithms and information spheres work. But it gives me like this icky full body cringe feeling. And in some sense, I'm just thinking like, good for you, like courageous. But I think other people could see that and think, well, what if you're glorifying, you know, what if that ambiguity and that lack of understanding is now promoting ideas that might be toxic in the public sphere? So I'm thinking through if I were in your position, those questions. And so, yeah, back to the kind of framing question of like, what is the value of that type of posting?
Someone thinks that this is glorifying. I guess my answer would be, I don't care. I mean, it's never really going to have an actual effect in that sense, you know.
In what sense? Like it's not going to promote somebody to go do something or change their beliefs. Or
exactly. Because I think it's just like so obvious this is not being endorsed. And if someone does understand that as an endorsement, then it's most probably not the post's fault. Like it was gonna happen anyways. There are like tons of gore sites or like, so it's I don't think it's like there will be much responsibility on certain posts here. And for the question of the value, this is what I had kind of like two answers to. First of all, I think one value is that what you just said about, I wouldn't have known that this was happening if you hadn't posted it. And I think one of the things I'm also deliberate about is to kind of pay attention to who is my audience and pay attention to what does my audience usually don't know when I view that in parallel with my background. Like, I've been in LA for like 3 years. I've lived in Europe for some time. I've like seen what usually transfers through cultures and what doesn't. And I've seen like things that I felt like I've always known this growing up, not really being the case for everyone, and vice versa, like knowing things here that I've never even thought was happening. So I feel like in terms of value, I think in that particular case of posts in that kind of sense, there's great value for me in the sense of exposing things to new audiences that wouldn't have known it is happening, because I feel like it is important for this kind of audience to know that this is happening. Like especially since most of my audience is more or less, similar minded, same kind of, almost the same politics with everything. So like a news channel kind of would do it. It's just like a lot of my posts are like, this is happening. Like I'm not saying in any way how you should think about it. I'm just like, delivering the news kind of thing. And then my other answer would be like, I'm also not interested in value. So that's why I said
say more about that.
Yeah. I guess it would also maybe connect to our earlier conversation about, the bad poem and I think like value is something that is very much chased by enough people that I I don't necessarily have to subscribe to that kind of system. And I think, I don't know, like on a philosophical level, it's not really something that I'm always after. I'm not like anti-value. Like I'm just like interested to see what do we find out if we don't necessarily pursue value in that sense, at least. I don't know if that answers the question, but
Yeah, it makes sense.
yeah, just to follow it up, maybe it explains my point a bit better. Angelus Novus, the very famous illustration about, you know, the angel looking back and it's just being pulled away and just seeing all the debris and seeing everything being destroyed. I had a discussion with the dean at SCI-Arc of the EDGE program, David Rue. We were talking about that particular scenario of like living in this debris, the wasteland, and like he was, I don't remember who he was referencing, who was kind of saying that what we should be, the only thing we're kind of like left with, or what we can do, is just like salvage whatever we can find from this debris. And I remember like my question then was like, why not kind of like add more debris and just like see what happens in a very kind of classic fuck around and find out kind of way, that just like to reverse the whole kind of frame of thinking beyond you know, what was formerly perceived as just like the way to go, to kind of just like truly go the opposite way without this end goal, or kind of, and again, this is why I need to kind of package all of this in the post brand, where you're not supposed to take any of this seriously. You're not supposed to kind of really follow whatever is being said, but it's just like all about, you know, poking explorations in as much unexplored areas as possible, to just like kind of keep pushing in whatever we find is just like giving a reaction of like, no, we shouldn't do that, is very interesting for post. And yeah.
What are you thinking about in terms of accelerationism? Because obviously, like in the, you know, Steve Bannon sense of accelerationism, of like, we need to essentially just accelerate everything that's collapsing about American democracy and bring it to its natural collapse. That gives me a lot of pause for a number of reasons that I can get into later.
Yeah.
There's also this question around climate and a lot of, you know, political strife around, you know, concerns or active right-wing takeovers, things like that. There's concerns that we have to move as fast as possible to solve the problem. And so there's this dance of like capital A accelerationism, and also this sense that you need to be moving faster and faster and faster. And I see you playing with a little bit of that in this comment about debris, or like adding more debris versus salvaging debris. And I also sense some of that contradiction and juxtaposition in post. So I guess broad question there, like, how are you thinking about accelerationism?
Yeah, I had a feeling we were gonna kind of end up talking about accelerationism, and if we frame it within that context of adding more debris, I think the idea is coming from a place of despair in a way. Like, why are we trying to salvage if like this is like we're living in this debris? Like, because what can you achieve with what you've salvaged from the debris? That's going to be so worth it. And the most counterintuitive thing to do is to just add more debris. What if that is actually almost, you know, lets you end up with the same kind of net positive? And again, post plays with these ideas like a LARPing sense, like, again, without fully committing to any of the final conclusions of the exploration. It's just like more about thinking about the other possibility to in a way better assess the efficacy of salvaging, you know. And in that sense, you you'll end up having a better idea of that. I should never really think of this as work. I must treat it as like a completely kind of silly thing. It is, of course, still a very silly thing, and it's not, again, serious work as like, I'm gonna design a book or whatever. But I just learn on just a formal level, like just the form of things, and you start noticing things, and like different crops on memes make a lot of difference, whether it's for the algorithm or for people just engaging with it or seeing something different.
So like, give me an example. Like, I know that Instagram wants you to do like more vertical looking images or something. So that would be one example, but what are some other?
Yeah. Like the level of how, pixelated a meme is, makes a difference. The level of, like, you've seen like deep fried memes, and it's just like, there are so many like aesthetic choices that you'll just take into account when doing something. And I think also it's very interesting to see how it changes across time, of course, like, from the very ancient memes of, the even like Comeback Steve or whatever, with just like impact font and one template, one everything. And then fast forward to now, and it's just like a meme could be just like a clip from an anime that has a caption that has nothing to do with the anime or anything, and you never see that clip again. So the idea of the meme having to be a template has very quickly not quickly, just over time faded away, and you start seeing right now less and less kind of like meme templates. Like right now, what we have, like the silence kind of meme. Right now is just like things are way more freeform, and I think that's because people are just like way more well versed with meme communication now than everyone was back in like 2009, 2008.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I really enjoy just like obsessing over these details, and like Instagram story creator kind of also changed the meme game with with like the drawing and the scratching, and you put something and you scratch, and then the different crops and different screenshots. Some people who are like more experimental avant-garde meme creators would post the meme with the screenshot kind of crop tool. Like when you screenshot and then you're cropping, it still has like these grids, and they would screenshot that and post it. So it's just like, it keeps going in very interesting new ways.
Yeah. Well, I've also noticed, like, I mean, this has been going on for a while, but I feel like we're at kind of a peak moment, in part because Twitter shitified so rapidly.
Yeah.
That so much of the like good or like memeable, the good tasty food for memes on Twitter is really having this whole second life on Instagram. And so you have like a lot of the, the banger tweets that then are of course being like interpolated any which way. But you also have this aspect of lore, like this aspect of like, and this whole thing around like meme admin reveal. Like there's like, now it's almost like the templates are like collapsing into the individual accounts, where it's like, now there's also this badge of honor to understanding like why this account says silly goose all the time or whatever it is. Yeah. How are you thinking about all of that?
No, I totally see it, and I really enjoy the deeper dives into every account's lore, and that's the only thing that kind of really makes me mad, is that I always like hoping for Instagram's downfall, but I keep finding very good like creators on it, and I keep like finding a lot of people who are doing extremely interesting work from like, in my opinion, and I'm like, but can we please find another platform? It's just like, it's a shame that this is kind of the situation of tech platforms, and I felt like we've been predicting the death of Instagram and social media in that sense, like the Web 2.0 kind of web for maybe 2 years now, but it's still going. And I don't know when are we gonna get rid of it finally, but yeah.
To be honest with you, my spidey sense is like actually that Instagram is like kind of coming through this slump and having like more attention because like, you know, there's this whole spat on Blue Sky right now, and that's really surfacing like the sort of ill will a lot of people have on Blue Sky. I mean, we don't even need to get into Truth Social. Twitter is what it is. So there's no single monolithic timeline feed. Certain people are really camped out on Mastodon or, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
But pretty much everybody's on Instagram, and Threads is okay, but I don't think Threads is actually where people want to be doing this either. There's something about how early Instagram baked itself into culture. And also, you know, I would call Instagram like a peak millennial platform.
Yeah.
And, you know, there are a lot of millennials.
Yeah.
And I think it was a formative platform for Gen Z as well, but there is a different relationship to it. And so I think for the time being, my read is like Instagram is kind of where this energy is going. And accounts like Post to me are evidence of this.
Yeah.
Where you don't even, I mean, you're not even, you've had a successful YouTube account in the past, and you're like not trying to go grow a YouTube channel. I mean, are you on TikTok?
Not in a like an actual trying to grow an account thing, just on TikTok as like a personal usage.
Yeah. So it feels to me like in this weird way, Instagram is becoming more of the place that like both has the kind of like lifestyle positioning thing.
Yeah.
But also where people are gathering and sharing information, also collapsing some of the Facebook like exodus of young people. Like, so everybody's kind of like, I don't know where to go, but I got the Instagram app up.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, I guess Facebook RIP, like we got one down, one more to go.
Oh, Facebook's still doing pretty well, but yeah, it's a ghost town.
Yeah. But I think I kind of agree that Instagram has, especially maybe actually it could be related to even October 7th, just had like some kind of spike. Could be, of course, because of how Twitter turned into 4chan. I don't view that as a good thing because we've seen like the politics of Meta being so unfairly like imposed on people. And I'm not just talking politics. I'm talking in general. Creators who, you know, do a lot of effort in whatever they're doing. And I'm not just talking meme accounts because we're generally like low effort, but like people who put a lot of work. And then I see like a lot of people on TikTok doing like TikTok, Instagram comparisons in terms of viewership and everything they're getting in terms of the algorithm and just the TikTok algorithm. Of course, it's not like something that we should be praising, but it's just like way more rewarding for creators than Instagram. And Instagram really works on this like, I don't know, like it's like a starvation model for creators. Like it really makes creators just not want to be on the platform because of how like dopamine deprived it makes them in that kind of sense. And even when you look at Mosseri's Instagram, he's the head of Instagram on like the guy below Mark. He's always posting reels that are like, you know, answering people's questions on why am I not getting views? Why am I? And like the comments, well, they're mostly all roasting him, and they're all like, you know, every time I look at your videos, I feel gaslit. Every time, you know, it's just like, when are you finally gonna give us a fair shot at whatever? And you can also kind of see, if you remember, like the pre-shitification internet, the idea of something just going viral out of the blue was way more common than it is right now. Like algorithmic bubbles are kind of more and more tightening on that sense. Like I remember just like stuff popping up on my feed that I wouldn't have ever kind of stumbled upon from like my followers or my mutuals or their mutuals and so on. So it's just like stuff that's just out of the blue, and now that's just like becoming more and more rare. Again, it's just like the same ideas of algorithmic bubbles, and I think TikTok has an algorithm that still allows something that's somewhat unrelated to what you've been generally watching to just pop up on your feed. And just, the old internet days was really about just like coming across stuff that you never thought existed. But right now it is almost like a, panopticon in the actual, Foucauldian sense.
I mean, in a somewhat literal sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
And your devices are watching you back.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sort of brings up a lot of different thoughts for me. Like, you came up on these forums.
Yeah.
And like, you had a successful YouTube account. I mean, there's inevitably an algorithm.
But that was when I was like 14 years old, like the YouTube account. Was just like,
Well, so what was that? I mean, how do you see that informing your relationship to the internet and digital culture?
I think it's really connects back to politics for me. Like I just always see it as just patterns of decision making, and me being on Instagram, there's always just like a part of me that just really wants to not be on Instagram, but just like, again, it's because it's a completely monopolized kind of market, and of course now with the TikTok ban, things might get a lot worse in terms of, you're not having a lot of options. The whole argument for what happened with, what they call the inshitification of the internet was that you don't have other platforms to kind of compete with whatever is happening. So you just have to just work with what you have. And now, like, my Instagram feed is a lot of the time just like not what I want to see in terms of, and I have to just like always try to be very proactive in like training the algorithm and just like liking the posts that I like and pressing not interested. Not interested on, and it's still, and like, for example, the ads. One time when I was in Dubai just 2 months ago, I got a real estate ad, and I was interested to just know like the financing options. I clicked on it, and I shit you not, if I open my Instagram right now, I cannot get rid of it. It's like a virus. Every ad, and it's always like 2 ads right after each other. If I'm like scrolling through stories, it's 2 ads, and the amount of real estate.
Is it because there have been some really funny viral videos from Dubai, like realtors doing like weird dances and stuff? Is it that type of stuff, or is it like just boring real estate? It's just like
ads? Actual boring shit, like with the price and like just like but so that's the thing, and I don't know, like, been pressing do not show this type of ads for like 3 weeks now, and this is the only kind of ad I get. Like, I'm hoping I get any kind of other ad, so I just could get like, so I click on it, and I'm probably gonna buy that product.
That's how they get you. Yeah, it's meta.
Yeah, just to get like the algorithm to learn that I need to just take a break from this. And you just feel so much lack of control being on the app, and just the idea of things being enforced upon you, and even like, I always need to have my feed show me like the most recent stuff. RIP chronological feed, of course, but at least right now, can I get like, because I need to be posting the most recent stuff as post, and then when I'm opening, I like the first post I see is like a 3 days ago post, and like a couple of scrolls, and I still see a lot of that. So it's just like it just feels like and it wasn't that way. So it's just always and that could be just my preference. Some people would like to see the older posts. I'm just saying the control that I have now is less and less and less, even when I started.
You would think that would be advantageous to Instagram to allow you to surface more of what you want, both from the organic content, but also if we have to be stuck in an ad tech model, then like at least let us help you advertise to us more effectively.
Yeah.
This is like way beyond both of our pay grades to talk about, but like, do you have any sense why? Like, it doesn't make sense from a business standpoint why it's this way.
Yeah, I actually, yeah, I think about this a lot, and I feel like I've never really can figure out, is it because they have enough data that says we're going to keep them on the app more if we're doing this, and they're just following the numbers, and this is what just brings them more ad money, and because more people are on the app when we do that, and it's supposedly like a very kind of numbers-based optimization that they will follow, and it's just like capitalism, it's the market, and this is what's happening, and it's kind of like this is what we have to do to just keep the company, to keep the shareholders happy and everything. And then I think the other possibility is that they probably care less because it has become more of like a monopoly. So keeping people happy not necessarily is the priority right now if you're managing, you know, a certain level of whatever you want in terms of revenue or whatever. So I think it's maybe a mix of both, maybe one or maybe something else entirely. But yeah, like you said, I guess it's above my pay grade. It's just like I'm making guesses based on being there. But I do sometimes feel it could be because their prioritization of, you know, good old customer satisfaction has not been a priority, because I feel even like on like the tech level of the app functioning well, it's become worse. I don't know if you've been experiencing the same thing, but
I have little moments where like images will just be black.
Yeah.
That happens more often than I feel like it used to. I never know because I use a VPN, and so many websites and apps are figuring out they don't want you using VPNs for obvious reason.
Oh.
And so I feel like the performance of various apps and websites is generally degraded for me, but I usually chalk it up to the VPN. So I'm not sure how much of that is like, you know.
Yeah.
One quick thing I would add to it is on your last point is it seems to me that Instagram is trying to, in the enshittification sort of framework, is trying to appeal to too many different parties, but none of them particularly well.
Yeah.
And like, to your point, I love this idea of like the starvation model. Yeah. It's like, as long as you just throw enough little scraps in various like categories, then maybe you like sort of hold the wolves at bay or something.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. And I think people complaining stopped making a difference, I guess. Again, looking back at just it's a minor example, but just the comments on Mosseri's Instagram and even, you know, I think judging by being online and seeing a lot of stuff, I guess Zuckerberg's popularity has also kind of went pretty downhill. So,
although it's coming back up now with his like
with the July 4th surfing
well,
video,
the July 4th, but I feel like July 4th was like capitalizing on like, you know, he's been wearing that chain and like he, you know, is doing like mixed martial arts and like growing his hair out a little bit. He's definitely on like a rebrand tour.
True. Yeah. I think, I agree, but maybe, I guess maybe my bubble is more very like anti Zuck.
Yeah, we have a lot. I'm not saying we should valorize Zuck. I'm only commenting on the fact that I know. I'm seeing them attempt the rebrand.
Yeah. I mean, like I was commenting on like how, you know, different feeds give different realities of yeah. But yeah, I mean, the last thing I remember seeing that I remember right now was when he just made that video about his Oculus thing, and he was like, by the way, this is just as good as the Apple Vision Pro, but it's cheaper. And it was just like he was trying to be like authentic, kind of, you know, nail like this, maybe like you said, a rebrand of like being, you know, a no bullshit kind of real guy, but it came off as, just, at least to me, very cringy.
Yeah.
And a lot of people were in the comments kind of supporting that, and they were like, just like, bro, where's your marketing budget? You know, like, so it was, and I think maybe he's also doesn't care as much. Maybe and sometimes I feel like if I was in his shoes, probably would I have, cared? I don't know. Like if you're that removed from everything, you probably just, care about a bunch of things and the rest is.
See, I wish that were more the approach. Like, I think that Elon Musk has really perfected the like reality distortion field billionaire guy.
Yeah.
And especially thinking about the post-recession, the 2010s, and the way that tech was framed around like magical thinking and cult of personality and like it's the charisma of the CEO.
Yeah.
And I think even though we're not in that economic or political context anymore, I think that a lot of other CEOs like want that type of influence because they saw what it did to, Tesla's bottom line. They saw all the things that Elon did that were straight up illegal or out of line that he kind of got a pass for, or just a slap on the wrist for because he was this larger than life character. I mean, there was that moment a few years ago where Jeff Bezos tried to like be on Twitter and everybody was like, dude, stop it. Like it's not funny. It's cringe, whatever. My guess is the reason that he's attempting this rebrand is that like Meta has recognized there's like a real, there's an interest to your bottom line here for you to be seen as like cool and young and hip and like, oh, you'll go fight Elon. And like, if anything, like, even though that fight never came to be, I think everybody kind of expects Zuck would have won just for all the obvious reasons. And so I'm concerned that this is like a phenomenon the way that like the celebrity VC became a phenomenon where it's like, you think that people get to a certain level of wealth and power and they're like, sweet, I'm going on vacations, I'm reading books, I'm spending time with my family. But I feel like I'm noticing the inverse effect, which is like, then they double down on, having social presence.
That's, I think I agree. It's pretty interesting to see they're kind of like, maybe Elon initiated this, some kind of like ghost of relevance that now starts haunting all these other kind of billionaires. And I think why Elon is probably hate him more than Zuck, but I think he's extremely smart, for example, with the cage fight thing, because he probably definitely knew like if there was a cage fight, he's going to lose. But just bringing up the idea of a cage fight, that was kind of like his, that's his like moves, and which is very similar to what Trump is doing. And I see that as kind of like just the defining technique of media in our times and like media personas. And like you said, it's just like being a cult of personality now has like let's say like an appendage of meta irony attached to it that wasn't necessarily the case for historical cult leaders or public figures, or people would love someone sincerely and be like, yeah, this is my leader, and just like be totally after that. But right now I feel like it's always got like some kind of layer of, like, for example, an Elon fanboy or Zuck fanboy or whatever. There's always just like this aura of humor around things in that sense. And again, of course, Trump as well. Like just like it really boils down to just like being more okay doing silly stuff that is not commonly known to be allowed. And I think until now everyone is trying to kind of like especially Elon, he's like, I feel like he's trying to upstage Trump or like out Trump, even with his like full on right wing kind of conversions and sharing the same kind of conspiracy theories and like insane like even these videos with like very bad edits and very bad like narration and has like text coming out, just stuff that uncles would be sharing on Facebook, and now you'd see Elon sharing that on his main, and I think it's pretty obvious that Elon doesn't really sincerely believe what he's sharing at this point, but he knows that some people will believe that he's sharing that sincerely and others don't, but still somehow it benefits his brand in that sense. Like so yeah, I think.
Right. Like provocateur.
Yeah.
Funny kind of.
Yeah, exactly. And even not just for provocation, just for, I guess maybe like it's like A/B testing. Like he puts it out and sees like data and just like understands more his audience, and that just gives him more insight for his next steps and how more right should he go, or should he just go back a little bit to the center, or it's just like it all became this big kind of LARPy discourse, especially on that kind of like very mainstream level. So yeah, just it's very defining, I think, of media in our time right now, in my opinion, which of course connects to post-truth and again, you can kind of look back at Trump as who made that so globally mainstream. But again, I also look back at it as, which is something also I mentioned in the publication, where we had Trumpism in Egypt like 5 or 6 years before. So I could see like how things were unfolding after Trump's election in 2016, just almost play out in the same way.
Say more about that.
We had the revolution in 2011, which was more or less a truly people-led thing. And then a year after, we had elections. Debatable how fair the elections were, but we had a president from the Muslim Brotherhood party, mostly kind of like fundamentalists, trying to appeal centrist kind of president. But the person who ran against him was Shafiq, who was like old establishment, like he was Mubarak's guy. So people were like, okay, we're again, it's kind of like a Trump or Biden situation, and then the Brotherhood guy won, and then a year later, basically a coup happened, and this is how we have the current president. The level of like post-truth that was happening during that time, it was the same techniques, saying things that are so out of this world, so uncomparable to any kind of logic, but you just get on with it because you have just complete impunity and nothing can touch you. So you keep doing it, you keep doing it, you keep doing it. And you don't care how many people believe it or not, because once you have that impunity, no one can really touch you, and you can just keep building the same narrative, and you can change the narrative as much as you want. You don't have to worry about consistency even. And that's why I was kind of intrigued to see the American left's reaction to Trump as being such a shock, because I felt like that was a normal part of politics. Like I just felt like, isn't that what we do? Like, and I think especially with, in Egypt, the people, most of the people know when something is not true, but they tend to just like let it happen and see what happens with it. But like, I was surprised that there were that many people who were sincerely believing in whatever political narratives were being spewed, or yeah.
You seem to have a strong belief around social justice and social equity being the, let's call it like top level priority before we start to address these other things. Like, I see it in the way that you're thinking about climate activists. I see it in the way you're talking now about the way like Americans were confronting American mythologies. Talk to me about that. Well, first of all, is that correct? And then second of all, yeah, okay, so if it is correct, tell me about that.
Most of my politics as like a 15-year-old kid was, I'd say, like largely influenced by my parents. I mean, they're religious, but they were also kind of like anti-government. They were pro-revolution, which wasn't also the case for a lot of my friends' parents, for example. Even my wife's parents were like very pro-Mubarak. Once I started like seeing politics, I could see like what dictatorships and authoritarian regimes do to people. Even during Mubarak's time, we had somewhat of a, I mean, I wouldn't say it was free press, but it was like way freer than it is right now. So there were like, journals that were known as like, these are the opposition journals. Like, it was possible to say that out loud back then. And one of those was called El Dastur, which means the Constitution. And it was one of like the most anti-Mubarak kind of journals back then before the revolution. I learned about just like how social injustice is very kind of impactful in many ways, and very kind of like close periphery ways. I just remembered a quote by Mark Zuckerberg where he said, a person living in his home in Oklahoma cares more about a dead squirrel in his backyard than like a starving person in like another country or another continent. And and I just think about that a lot in terms of just like context. And again, Kamala now just has a trademark over that word. I hate her for that, but yeah, it's just like you think about. I think it has to do a lot with the physical environment that you grow up in, and just like what you get exposed to. So maybe that, I think, influenced just like my way of thinking. And then I guess the revolution happened when I was 16. It was 2011. And my parents wouldn't let me go to Tahrir Square, but we did like every neighborhood kind of did its own like militia kind of like the men of the street just go down and we make some like improvised weapons, and we set up a campfire down and try to like enforce some security around every area, every neighborhood. It was actually like nice. Like it wasn't scary for some reason. That kind of was an early kind of lived experience that got me exposed to what happens when there's this kind of like level of unrest, and what happens in terms of community. Like I remember in that campfire, we'd be like, just like me, my dad, who's like a pharmacist, and a guy who's like a former cop, who's like the only one with a gun on the street, and then kind of like valets, in Egypt, who were just generally from a different social class, but they had the most badass weapons, and we would all just like and then sit around this campfire and it got to like some kind of like prehistoric kind of primitive vibe to it, where just like everyone is back on that level, and we're just like sitting there, and somehow it did not feel unsafe, and it felt like very kind of like purpose driven, and we were protecting our women, but yeah, and I think maybe all these kind of events were kind of subconscious initiations to why I see things the way I do right now when it comes to like the work I do. Also, the disappointment was a big driving factor for me to kind of just try to keep focus on, like you said, like you could see that I prioritize this part before anything else. And I think it could be related to also the disappointment of seeing what happens after such a moment of hope and a moment of there was just like so much optimism, especially on February the 11th when Mubarak announced that he's stepping down. That was the only day we were allowed to go to Tahrir Square. Like my parents took us when we went. It was all celebrations. It was all fireworks, and it was just like July 4th on steroids. And everyone just like picking trash from the streets, you know, hugging and dancing, blah blah blah, and it was just like there was a real kind of shared agreement that now finally we can just like kind of build this. And as a 16-year-old, I think I really really believed that this is like so real, and it really kind of you know, maybe I guess like affected me on some kind of deeper level. So fast forward like 3, 4, 5 years, and I could see like the decline of how everyone starts abandoning that kind of promise, whether it's people abandoning it or other kind of like state factors, you know, regaining power and just going back into like the old ways and going back into the cycles of oppression and so on. But I could see also the like how losing focus on that like kind of core issue affected so much. Like I could see people who were very like active in Tahrir Square 3 or 4 years later are on the same TV shows that were kind of like very anti-revolution, and it's just like all about getting gigs and so on and so forth, and just, you know, and everyone talks about like, oh, everyone gets bought in the end, blah blah blah, and I tend to kind of like not believe in these like kind of cynical takes, but I've seen a lot of like change happen, not necessarily because of a bunch of people, but it was really more about like a kind of a loss of objective and a loss of vision with time, and it happened like on such a mass scale. Like a defining moment for me was when it was in downtown Cairo, very like 2 blocks from Tahrir Square. There was a graffiti of, I think, one of the martyrs from the revolution. Or maybe it wasn't one of the martyrs, but it was something that was just like very representative of, you know, the moment. And it was like something that meant so much to a lot of people. And I remember, I think that was maybe like 2015, there was some kind of gentrification happening in the area, coupled with like a rise in tech startups getting offices there, and like getting, you know, VCs coming to Egypt for the thriving tech scene, blah, blah, blah. And then I remember that graffiti was erased and replaced with a graffiti of the Egyptian goddess Nefertiti with like shades, specs, glasses, which is like the perfect kind of like Pinterest gentrified neighborhood kind of graffiti. And I think that was one of the moments where I really, really started to kind of like buy in the losing hope kind of rhetoric, where it was just like, yeah, this is like so over, because the people doing that graffiti were not like the army, they were not the military, they were probably the same people who were in Tahrir Square. So that was kind of like the idea of losing focus that I started seeing.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. Actually, I never thought about it. So when you asked the question, that's why maybe I was slow with replies, but I was just like, trying to figure out why.
super, super fascinating. Yeah. And also, I mean, it gives you such perspective on, you know, let's call it the past decade of American politics.
Yeah.
As foolhardy as it is to try to like locate moments in time, I'm really, my brain is latching onto the way in which disappointment and despair, what those factors play in the formation of your own thinking. And then of course the way that post is sort of an outcome.
Yeah.
So like, let's zoom in on those. Like, talk to me about those feelings of despair, disappointment, how that relates to like doing anything. Because of course the natural outcome of those things oftentimes is inaction.
Yeah.
So yeah, how are you thinking about that?
One of the things that makes me feel like a fraud usually is just like I'm LARPing really the whole ironic thing and the meta irony thing, and at the end of the day I end up really caring about a lot of like important issues. But I think I really believe in this idea of like the medium as like a separate thing, and it just allows you to play with things outside the normal kind of expected rhetoric. So this is why I feel post kind of was able to just allow me to just be more free and less uptight about ideas. And at the same time, there is a layer of it where it's kind of like very serious about, you know, it's inquiry, and it's you know, scholarship in a way, to kind of really look for new ways of thinking, not necessarily new ideas, but just new ways of thinking. And I think just this idea of ways of thinking versus ideas is really the difference between like medium and content. It's just like, I don't necessarily want to arrive at something rather than investigate the process itself more. And again, of course, this is like extremely prevalent in like quote unquote avant-garde thought and experimentation, and just like pushing further and further. And I think, again, when you asked about like how this connects to post, my thinking is always connected to this idea of like the avant-garde in connection with its military sense, you know. So it's like the origin of the word was really about the vanguard, who are, you know, who go and kind of take the first kind of leap and take the risk of just getting killed, or they get new territory and let people advance. And I think that's how like the connection comes again in you know, with the revolution and what I saw happen as like the lived experience. This is why I feel avant-garde had to be turned into like also like a silly concept or a funny thing, because again, it's also very kind of associated with you know, very early modernist tropes and associated with a lot of you know, old white people on cocaine, and it's just I was simultaneously just like trying to remove it from that and go back to its more like abstract form, and just put these ideas forward to make sure that it's very connected with the actual idea of being avant-garde in terms of social progress and I always feel like it's very inevitably connected to politics in that sense. This is why I feel like avant-garde is very connected to both the formal, the medium side, and the political side, the material side, the historic side. So yeah, and I think it just offered maybe some kind of refuge to feel like what I'm doing is fulfilling that kind of connection that I wanted to fulfill, you know.
Do you feel any difference in terms of what post is to you versus what responsibility you hold yourself to with a community? Like, you know, I know that there's a lot of talk of like selling out and stuff like that, and I don't have any fear of you selling out. It's more like, especially in algorithmic culture, there's a way that like you can start to be shaped by what is sort of resonating with your audience, and then that can kind of intensify.
Yeah.
So in thinking about your goal, because you are, I mean, even the book is Reflections on a New Avant-Garde.
Yeah.
So you're thinking about post, both as like you and these ways of expressing and these ways of kind of getting at, you know, process versus object or process versus outcome. But then you also are like making an argument out into the world that's seeking audience and that's seeking feedback from audience. So how are you now at this particular moment in post sort of lifespan thinking about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I already sold out in a way, but like,
what way? What was the, like, in what way?
Very recently, I was taking a look back at my the earliest posts in like April 2022, May 2022. And I could see like I was willing to take a lot more risks in terms of like, you know, posting stuff that could be really way more niche than what I'm posting right now. And I can see like how the more audience I have, the more I feel like I'm trying to cater to kind of just like a larger or wider kind of audience. I'm trying to still, of course, keep the niche kind of effect, but also, you know, the dream for post is to actually be very mass and like in a very wide kind of spectrum. Because that, I think that is really the best way to test it, even like just to get as much kind of feedback and impact and even like in a loop kind of thing, like as an experiment, you know. I think it would be most effective when it's just like more and more people. But I totally understand also how that is not that feasible, you know. But I'm enjoying the growth that it's been doing, and I think I also post about selling out a lot, and just like I'm selling out. By the way, even I think during October and November, when everything was just like very high stakes, and I was clearly posting like, by the way, if I get any like, you know, message from any political secret service, I'm like immediately flipping to the other side. I'm not I'm not gonna, you know, hold on to anything. Same thing if, you know, we do end up publishing what I talked about in terms of Egypt. I'm saying it on record. I'm ready to flip any second. But yeah, I think in terms of, again, the idea of selling out, it feels like it's not such a big deal because post still will always have like a repulsive factor to it, that won't make it that co-optable by, you know, systems and capital and so on. So it's still like ongoing, and we're gonna see like how it, you know, pans out. I mean, already this podcast is something that, you know, the 2022 post didn't think would, you know, happen. But then again, there's like the publication, and then there's the publication being sold at Tate Modern, which is an actual institution that is very, like, I used to think that there's someone, for example, for you to stock at Tate in London, there is definitely someone who just like has to read every book before it's stocked. And I'm sure no one read Post before putting it on like in Tate, because maybe it has a lot of ideas that are not very pro Tate and whatnot. So I think I'm enjoying, of course, grateful for what it has brought and what it has become, but I'm not that opposed to selling out eventually. I don't know. But also tell me what you mean more by selling out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, I think we're using selling out differently.
Yeah.
To me, like, selling out is the best example that I have for it. And the spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the first or second series of Black Mirror, that being said, it was like 14 years ago. But there's an episode where somebody makes a grand stand and puts himself at risk of incredible self-harm because they're trying to sort of express their rage and grief that, like, you took everything that was beautiful from me.
Yeah.
And it happens in sort of a game show context.
I think was that the one with the bikes?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But basically, the judges of this game show see this thing, which was a real act of threat and of violence, and they basically say, that's good. And they turn him into a TV show.
Yeah.
And then he's living in his cubicle with like a better digital view rather than having to be on the bicycles, which is making all kinds of comments. But to me, the sellout quality of it in this case, like if you're an activist or somebody who has made a name as an actively political person, because of course it's very different if you sold out from the very beginning and you're never political, then it's selling out has a different, more kind of like cringy corporate Mr. Beastie style quality to it. But when I think about what selling out for you would look like, it would be if like you started working with particular brands and doing particular ads for those brands that were outside the scope. Like inevitably, there's probably some brands that would be amazing to work with, and that would you working with them would be sort of fun and interesting and provocative.
Yeah.
I don't know who they are. Feel free to weigh in if how you feel about that. Yeah. But there's definitely a set of brands that would indicate to me that like you basically monetized your audience, monetized your sort of intellectual foundations, and you know, I wouldn't fault you for that. Everybody's got to make their living, but that would make me feel sad.
Okay, I think I understand what you mean more, but I also again maybe have a question about like the monetization of things. Like what are, maybe this I could phrase as a question, like can I ask questions as well?
Feel free.
Like what would it mean to just to monetize this kind of intellectual property, but at the same time finding a way to not drop any of its principles, you know, in a way. And I think if you manage to kind of build a brand that is, you know, unpredictable enough and volatile enough, and it just becomes something that if a brand wants to collaborate with you as like they're taking a risk with it, that could be potential for something interesting. What do you think about that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I also should say, you know, all the like late capitalist memes aside, anecdotally, I'm just observing so many people having to make more and more compromises.
Yeah.
And we just have to understand that like essentially what's happening is we're all being crunched.
Yeah.
And to have compassion for ourselves and for each other as that crunch leads to different negative outcomes. And I think it's very easy, particularly for people in the kind of sweet spot safe spaces like academia, to kind of look about, like survey the landscape and sort of review the different actions people are making with a lot of judgment. I'm not wanting to fall into that trap. I mean, you know, I work with the brands I've selected that I feel very good about for this newsletter and podcast. So would not want to be seen as saying like there's not a place for doing the work with brands.
Yeah.
And I think this gets at this sort of shifts it like 15%, but it's in the direction that you're taking it, which is I've had a lot of conversations, even it's like a year later, about the Barbie movie to this effect.
Yeah.
Of like, is the Barbie movie a net good? Like it does produce a sort of feminism 101 for a lot of people who wouldn't have encountered feminist ideas.
Yeah.
On the other hand, Mattel hoovers up all the financial value of that kind of highly intellectualized but accessible storytelling content. And the jury's out for me. Like I couldn't come down and say like I think it's a net good or a net bad. It lives in this chaotic middle space that I think is related to what you would be talking about if you were working with a weird brand and doing something fun.
Yeah, I agree. I mean I'm very pro Barbie. So I remember posting about it. I think like you said, it's again, maybe this connects to the despair kind of idea where it's, yes, Mattel did all the profits, but our options were Mattel doing all the profits minus Feminism 101 or Mattel doing all the profits plus Feminism 101. So I feel like, especially what I feel like was a net good about Barbie was in terms of like its global effect, not just in America, and but also in America in terms of like the ideas of Feminism 101 turns out they're not that common, you know, and that's also part of one thing that I tried to infuse into the post writings is that the left is usually not that in touch with, you know, and this is something even probably every leftist knows and says to themselves every day, you know,
in the mirror.
Yeah. Like I know, I don't know what my neighbor thinks. So but at the same time, there's still that kind of like, you know, purity chasing and classic left kind of behavior, or like I'm the leftiest in the room, and so yeah, and I even remember when I was doing the master's degree at SCI-Arc, one of the classes I took, I think it was like gender performance and architecture, so it had to do with all those. We were reading a lot of theory on all of those, but the professor asked, what are your thoughts on feminism, as like a very general kind of question. And I remember, most of the people taking the class are like the edgiest, coolest kids in LA. And most of the responses were kind of like, I feel like it's such an outdated concept. I think really it's place is the 20th century. Like there's no, like we're so post-feminism right now. Like it's such an old idea, and, you know, and I remember like just 2 days earlier, I was watching TV. I enjoyed just like flipping through the actual American channels, because at that point I was just like 3 months in, and just I don't even think it was Fox News. It was something more like centrist, interviewing people somewhere in like Midland America, and they were all like extremely kind of like anti-feminist, and so the again, maybe it connects to like the bubbles and everything, but it's just like so many people in America needed to watch Barbie, and you could see the online discourse of like, my girlfriend left me after watching Barbie, and stuff like that. Was, yeah. So I think maybe we don't have to like give Barbie awards, but it's not particularly a negative thing for society at all, like in my view. So
this is maybe the inverse, but it's a nice follow-on inverse, which is that you've done a lot of writing and thinking around the figure of the edgelord.
Oh yeah.
And I think a lot of people hear edgelord and they're immediately like, incel, no thanks.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the edgelord.
Yeah, I think it's. I remember the first time I think we met was at SCI-Arc, and I was very early stages of developing the edgelord ideas and so on. And I remember I talked to you about maybe getting it published on Do Not Research. What you told me back then was like, you told me if you do actually manage to properly kind of like deconstruct the connection to, you know, alt-right and incel culture, it could be like really beneficial to kind of like do that. And yeah, and that's ultimately what I ended up doing, to just like, because I had so many points on how to kind of deterritorialize that term and just make it really like a branding thing. It was more of like a branding thing for the left to kind of just like, you know, take that back and own that term. And because I felt like it was cool. Like there was nothing inherently kind of, or like historically relevant in the term edgelord for anything political, but it was just rather the style and the effect of what an edgelord is or what an edgelord does, that kind of resonates with people. But it was just like always kind of connected to, you know, a 4chan edgelord who would just troll some, you know, trans people, and then goes and buys a gun and kills his school or whatever. So, and I felt like the idea of, or the way of thinking of an edgelord is usually more about this kind of poking and provoking without committing to any kind of fixed position. And that was really the act of edgelording. Is like you're supposed to kind of just like suspend all belief and suspend any kind of fundamentalist thinking, and whatever happens that turned an edgelord into a fascist stopped him from being an edgelord as well. Like you cannot be an edgelord and a fascist at the same time, because a fascist requires a much different kind of way of thinking and a much different belief than an edgelord. So it felt like that was the way to kind of just like decouple the two kind of ideas. And again, of course, I just connected to a lot of like Bataille writings about, of course, he's like the king of edgelords, and so many like historical edgelords whom I decided to call edgelords. But again, yeah, it was a way of just wanting to take back that term and make something cool with it, because it was also part of the film that I was working on, and I created this character, the edgelord, and it was again like a satire of what's an edgelord, but at the same time, you know, in the film lore, he was supposedly like a radical leftist or whatever. And it connects to the ideas of, you know, the people who are claiming they are good are usually bad, and the people who are, you know, claiming they're bad, they're usually good. Like, and I draw analogies between like punks and hippies, and you know, not necessarily presenting as like a peace-loving someone does not mean like you're free from ego and judgment, and then that leads to, you know, a fixed moral position that allows you to kind of kill another one because of your belief. But an edgelord is rather on the other side, on the inverse, on like the. So that was kind of the connection. I don't know if I would say like happy or not happy when I saw Harmony Korrine's creative agency or consultancy. He called it edgelord, like a year after the thing was published. So I would say it's.
You're like, I was onto something, but also that's kind of annoying.
Yeah, I mean, because a lot of people like DM'd me when that happened. Like they were like, hey, look, are you connected to that? Do you know if he read your piece and so on? So
do you know? Did he read your piece?
I had no idea. I made a story post and I tagged him, but I don't think he saw it.
All right, well, Harmony, if you're watching.
Yeah, no hard feelings.
So thinking about the edgelord as a leftist, or as like as a progressive figure, like I'm seeing how like your framework around there's no fixity, and there's a certain epistemic humility coupled with a kind of prank, kind of a puckishness of like, whatever you think I shouldn't say, I'm going to say it exclusively because you've decided that I shouldn't say it. And of course we see how that kind of Venn diagrams with at least the way that fascism and far-right rhetoric has sort of moved in the past, let's call it couple decades. Mm-hmm. I'm interested to think about, like, in trying to reclaim the edgelord for the left, there's something else that's, I think, an adjacent line of conversation that, I don't know, there's maybe something there, which is there's a lot of talk right now in the wake of the assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump about Blue Anon, about like conspiracism and both the belief and propagation of conspiracies among the left, and the ways that is, you know, extending some of the conspiritualist stuff that was happening, 4 or 5 years ago, but also taking it in kind of different directions. Are you thinking about those folks at all with your output in post in your thinking of edgelord, like in your thinking of the figure of the edgelord?
I mean, I guess not, again, because, for example, if we talk about Blue Anon and the person who tried to assassinate Trump, again, he's kind of like fully committed to a decision. So he had already kind of left his edgelordism in a way. Like, he shed the skin of an edgelord and he became a fundamentalist who wants to kill someone. And the argument is that if you remain in the kind of edgelord mental space or way of thinking, you do not get to that point where you have such a strong belief as to end someone else's life. So that that's kind of like the why it not necessarily becomes connected. And again, how I also view, left and right is, I guess, maybe more like on an abstract level rather than on. So I guess I wouldn't consider at face value anyone who like is deemed like blue anon as a leftist. Like I think it's like, I think a lot of people who might identify as right wing, maybe if they just like tell you their beliefs, you realize that they're actually more left than people who are, identifying as left. And then when you sit down and you have a conversation, they end up seeming more right. And I just view it, even when I look back at, the origin of, left and right, and we go back to Rousseau and really left-wing thought comes from the belief that, at least that's how I see it, that you view the other or people as people who are just like born good. They're born good. You can trust people in general. And then right-wing ideology comes from the opposite of like, you do not trust people. So you believe people are born bad or are kind of like corruptible and in that sense. But, the left kind of tends to believe that you are like, everyone is born equal, so everyone is good, and then society imposes a lot of things, and we end up having criminals, for example. But a right-wing belief would be like, no, this person is actually evil. He was born evil, and it has nothing to do with like, and I feel like these are kind of like the final kind of, when you peel off all the layers, these are like the philosophical kind of polars. And yeah, so basically you feel like it's like an ideology that's really operated on love, and one is operated on fear, and yeah, like a right winger would be like, no, this is out of love because I care about my family, I want to protect them from immigrants. But it's just like there is an othering there that eliminates that and puts fear above it, and then that's kind of like how I see just like the connection of right and left. So I think this is why it connects to the point I was making about edgelords, and it's about not having that engine of fear driving the ways of thinking and the philosophies, rather just having an engine of, well, not necessarily love, but like more of, in the case of the edgelord, it's just like, harmless provocation in that sense.
I think, and you referenced it earlier, the kind of discontent among what we call the left, because of course, like a moderate, centrist liberal is a very different thing than, a socialist.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying socialist disparagingly, but like literally. And so the fact that like they all have to seemingly vote in a block is weird. Like on the world stage, it's a weird thing that we're doing. And still, that is the political reality of America. And so it's worth discussing. Like, you're obviously in touch with, and a lot of your audience is within that block of people. And so one thing that I feel like a lot of people will say, even if their positionality is very different, is a frustration with the left. Not that they're like wanting to, change their, intellectual and moral positions, but that like the social dynamic of the left isn't working. Are you seeing any of that? Like, how are you encountering it?
I agree 100%. And I also see that the bigger issue is the mischaracterization of the left and the misidentification of the left. Like, there is no actual left in like governing power in America, arguably, so I feel like, you have people living in America who think that America is becoming communist because the Little Mermaid was the new one was black. So so that is a belief that you have that is not that uncommon of the left in America. So it's kind of like so kind of removed from what things actually mean. And so like when you said, you know, you have like a moderate centrist liberal who is dramatically different than someone who's like more of a socialist. It's still kind of they're so lumped together in such a way that is really not benefiting the left themselves in that sense. So and I think we can see examples, for example, in France, for example, the recent elections. You can see that there was not just like a center liberal or a center left coalition, but they also had like a center right one, and it was like a lot more kind of diversified. But in America, it feels like it's getting every 4 years it becomes more and more stuck in that kind of removed from reality kind of political discourse. Maybe it has to do a lot with media and how informed people are. I personally believe that, but I think it's just like it's been like a conundrum that's even like from 2016, like that was the, let's say online at least, the very early kind of we both options are bad kind of discourse. And then with Trump and Biden, the discourse was louder, and we could see like more and more people being like, I'm not even voting if it's Biden, not Bernie, and so on. And then I feel like this year it's significantly higher in terms of awareness that, okay, this is what we are ending up with. Hopefully at some point this could lead to like a rethinking of the government bodies and how, you know, all the branches of government are configured, whether it's the Supreme Court, it's the, you know, House of Representatives, Congress, and it's definitely not just the president at the end of the day. And yeah, and again, of course, there's the how connected whoever is in politics right now with corporate power, and of course, some are of course conspiracy theorists, but some have a lot of validity to them. They kind of have massive influence over, you know, politics and policies and.
That doesn't feel like conspiracy theory. I mean, there've been like bills that like had their typos pushed through by Latinos.
Absolutely, and lobbying, of course, and everything. I mean, what I was referring as conspiracy is just maybe more of like the people who are like, yeah, BlackRock controls every single thing. I see. Yeah, so, but yeah,
got it.
So yeah, that's what I feel in terms of you know, defining what the left is. I think we should kind of start there to kind of just like maybe rebrand a little to just kind of first of all let centrists know that the left does not equal Black Little Mermaid, like that has nothing to do with left policy, and just like put the idea of the left on on the economical level, just put that at the forefront of left rhetoric. Like identity politics has kind of took center stage, and that's like what right wingers use the most as bait to be like, this is what the left wants, and this is the left, and then turns out it's actually probably like a registered Republican or whatever. So
yeah. Do you see, like, in thinking about the future of post, because what we're describing, like, obviously, you know, there's like lots of kind of clickbaity angles to that. But to me, it feels like one of the most important problems that we face, because it's related to, if we have a toxic information ecosystem and we can't organize and build solidarity, then all of these problems really will get beyond us. I mean, we were talking about climate earlier. There are certain climate problems that we are actually either past the tipping point for or approaching them. And I agree completely with you that we need to emphasize social equity as the how, in terms of, the sort of like thinking about decolonial futures, decolonial approaches to climate change. We simultaneously need to recognize that there's a very narrow window of time where those things matter significantly more than they will in the future, because it'll be too late with certain tipping points. And so the group of people who I see as being capable of stepping up both for social futures and climate futures are folks on the left. And so when we talk about like this kind of like battleground that the left has turned into and this lack of solidarity, it gives me a lot of concern. So circling back to post.
Yeah.
I guess maybe before I sort of write you into my own concerns, do you share that concern? And if you don't, why?
I do, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So given that you do, where does post fit in that? In thinking about the avant-garde in its sort of military political sort of associations and
Again, post is still, for me, hopefully it will remain so work in progress. So I always want to maintain like enough flexibility to make it kind of whatever I want it to be, and then just like push it as like a brand and just kind of LARP as a brand, and just use even like my professional experience as a branding strategist. And right now, I think in terms of like the times, it's going to be best positioned as like a media kind of channel, outlet, whatever. That is happening like through social media, but again, it can expand to so many other things. So first to start with the publication, there is a second volume coming up maybe next year. There are also possible fashion collaborations. So it is going to be a targeting of a certain niche that I want to kind of imbue with a certain kind of loyalty to the movement. I don't know, like it's kind of like, again, also maybe connected to the idea of the avant-garde and starting a movement and whatnot. But it's as like a media channel. It can exist in multiple mediums, but it's just like going to have that objective of just like trying to push out ideas that are, to use the Urgent Futures note of signal amidst the noise, even though post is actually noise, but it's just like, at the end of the day, it wants to create so much noise that it becomes like some kind of signal. To
the noise is the signal.
Yeah, to those who get it. Yeah. Like the noise is the signal.
That's cool. That actually really resonates.
Yeah.
With what post feels like. Like, even though I have a deeper sense of you and the type of stuff you post, consistently there's something where I'm like, oh,
okay.
Like, you know what I mean? So you've managed to maintain something that I think is very hard to maintain.
Great. Yeah, that's good to hear, because I'm always kind of worried about that. Like am I still edgy enough?
Am I still the edgelord? Yeah. Let's talk about some of the writing in pieces in the book.
Sure.
If you were to kind of point somebody to this and say, if you want to get a sense of what we're about, what are some of the pieces that you would point people to in the collection? I
guess we did like an interesting intro in the beginning. So my co-editor on Post is Roba Al-Suail. She's an artist and writer based in Dubai, and she's currently in New York as well. So what we did at the beginning was an intro. We did it in like an interview format to kind of explain what Post is in the most accessible terms possible. And again, it's ultimately not going to be like a conclusive explanation of what it actually is, but it's more again of the describing the approaches of post and so on. So we did that in the format of like Roba interviewing me about post. And I guess the next thing I would recommend is the DM interviews. I got the idea after like the Instagram thing kind of popped, and I realized a lot of important people who I look up to started following me. So I was like, I'm not that also kind of like established as like a media kind of outlet to do like an actual serious interview. So I was like, I just DM'd a couple of people and I was like, hey, do you want to do an interview through the DMs right now? I have a couple of questions I want to ask. And yeah, and that was largely successful. And I think the people we picked and the responses we got are, I mean, I'm proud of how much they kind of describe the zeitgeist. Or
by the way,
yeah.
it's so, I've been noticing throughout the conversation all the scare quotes.
Oh,
and
yeah.
also for people listening, like just to note, like the scare quote as like this key piece of how you're talking about post. It feels important.
I think I cannot live without it right now, like because everything for me is very like up for grabs in terms of definitions, and I use so many words that I'm not like fully convinced of them as the words that I want to use, but maybe they come to my mind faster, and I have this kind of like multi-layered irony packaging on everything. So I just, again, maybe it's about not committing to any fixed positions. I'm just like always, you know, quoting it. But yeah.
And then also talk to me about the Madonna imagery and design.
You remember the TikTok. So I think it was such an iconic moment back then. I think it was 2022 as well. It was basically the reveal of this new Madonna, like in a way, because it was a new aesthetic and it was on TikTok. So it was, and it got a lot of like negative press, which I did not really understand why, because I felt it was very Madonna anyways. But yeah, I got like how people were claiming that it's very cringy and so on and so forth. But I really just saw it as like on an image level as something very powerful and defining. And then of course I was not sure about, you know, using it as the cover, but I read up on you know, the legalities of it, and it's just like a screenshot from TikTok. So yeah, and I felt like it really works great as like a cover, and then just cover the eyes and the mouth with the post buttons, and yeah.
It gets in a little bit. You brought up LARPing a few times.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking about like LARPing, like obviously there's your relationship to LARPing with post, but also I think there's a bigger comment you're making there that I'm also then seeing in those Madonna TikToks, where there's this awareness of context TM, scare quotes. And then how you, particularly if you're a public figure, then orient yourself and sort of cast yourself within that. And that's always existed as long as there's been, you know, a public to observe, you know, whatever celebrities were. But I feel like the kind of revolving process, like that, the back and forth thing that happens now is just, and the sort of variety of different ways that it happens is actually novel historically. So yeah, I want to push in deeper into the kind of like question of like the relationship of LARPing and reality.
Like you said, it has become very ingrained in our like daily life existence, and this also maybe connects to some to one piece in post. It's called Hello Para Real, and it really talks about this idea of, you know, reality and the post-truth terms, and try to kind of dissect that a little and see what it can kind of give us and what we can learn more about it. And I think LARPing is a huge part of it, because what used to be kind of like autofiction is now becoming more of like a thing that you can live and live as, and just like become that thing, and not in like a writer's sense, but just like in a more embodying sense.
It's like, instead of live your truth, it's live your autofiction.
Yeah, exactly. The subtitle of that essay is, now you finally don't have to be yourself. So it's also commenting on like authenticity discourse, and like you got to be your true self and find who you are and all that kind of stuff. is like completely reversed right now. And like you said, it does feel very novel to kind of have arrived at a point where we're all a lot of the online people are aware of this kind of like multi-layered existence in terms of what I choose to be today, and kind of in that sense. So it might be very related to Gen Z, and it's also very prevalent in like, how people are designing future games, and like, of course, LARPing originated in gaming, but I feel like now it's having like almost like a double effect on it. Like it left gaming, well, it remained in gaming, but it went from gaming to reality, and then took a new form in reality, and then now that form is being pushed back into gaming with the new technology to kind of just like more and more layers, and I think that's super exciting, honestly, and I think that is a huge part of why I felt like we needed to push past postmodernism, and that post would be more ready and more about catering to that kind of new sense of existence, and understanding it, and not opposing it as postmodernism would.
Right. Like you've so fully embraced your LARP that you're not even bothering to do the wink nudge.
Yeah. Exactly. But I still have to do the square quotes, unfortunately.
Yeah, of course. Well, you're describing. I mean, you don't do scare quotes when you're doing posts.
True.
When you're posting.
Yeah.
Okay, we talked about a lot of like sort of heavy political stuff. I guess maybe to pull us out into something a little bit sort of looser and softer. I guess the broad question I want to ask is like, how do you describe the state of culture now when brands are coming to you like, hey, we need to compete?
So far, like most of my client work is largely on the like kind of like apolitical side, where even if they are politically initiated in any way, they always want to not deal with anything political. And it's always just like, I just want to focus on my product, create a generally acceptable looking brand, and not really go far with it, especially because my work is also more on the tech side, and like Silicon Valley kind of type of people, also back in the MENA region with Dubai, and some of the right now in Saudi Arabia, it's also booming, but they're all kind of still within that bubble of, we can still kind of manage to not engage that, and manage to not have to think about it, and manage to just completely avoid having to just hit that. But I do with like some clients probe sometimes to kind of just like try to create a more interesting brand, try to have like a more interesting brand narrative, and so on. And I think I've been doing this also more with like LA clients or US based clients, but mainly LA, because clients here are more maybe more culture adjacent, like jewelry designers, video production agencies, and so on. So they're more able to kind of navigate these spaces with like making like some kind of edgy quip every now and then that kind of gives their brand attitude or whatever. But I think I do approach like the branding work from a more like removed standpoint, just because I think just like the state of the world, like you cannot really get paid for being anti-capitalist, So again,
quote of the day.
Yeah. Like that, at the end of the day, it's just like I have to, like just like make get the bread and whatever.
Well, and to be clear, I'm not even saying like how do you, try to fight the good fight and get brands to like be socially conscious or sort of aware.
Yeah.
I even mean like my sense is a lot of these brands are probably like, how the hell do we communicate with Zoomers? Like how do we communicate with Gen Z, or how do we communicate with Gen Alpha, or like what are the trends on Instagram, and like how do we like? So I'm actually asking something even more zoomed out of like, when these people are approaching you, Because I'm assuming a lot of listeners to this show are probably going to be in a similar boat of like, I feel totally adrift and lost in this like weird ocean of digital culture that's emerged.
Yeah.
So like, how do you orient people to understanding that, or to having places where they feel like they, you know, they have the ground beneath them?
Yeah, I mean, I think I direct them towards solutions that I feel like will help them nail what they're looking for. Like, for example, if we want to, you know, be relevant to Zoomers, I kind of just use my background and my kind of expertise and whatever experience to kind of just like pull up a pitch that shows them in a pretty like convincing manner, like this is why Zoomers like this, and this is how your brand can kind of be similar to this in a way you can gamble on Zoomers liking you as well. So it's kind of like pretty methodical and just like it's not like no risk taken, but it's kind of like everyday kind of daily work. But I think maybe what you're asking is like if they're worried about not connecting with this audience, and I think brands also exist in their own bubbles in a way, and their audiences exist in their own bubbles, and they don't necessarily have to worry about like discourse bursting these bubbles yet. Like maybe in a year or two.
One day.
Yeah.
You're lucky.
But right now, like from what I see when I'm working like as a brand strategist and then posting on post, I can see very parallel worlds. And maybe that world might be more affected with time, but right now it's very able to just exist totally, separate. And we've seen even after October 7th how nothing really changed in the sense of, brands, marketing stuff, and just like there's like a very masterful denial technique that every brand knows how to kind of implement, and because it's not hard. But yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
All right. There are 3 questions I like to ask every guest. You've hit on some of this already, so feel free to call stuff back in from earlier in the conversation or extend or whatever. So the first of which is, what is one thing you wish people paid more attention to?
That the West is over, maybe. Like that, I feel like that is something, maybe it's been happening for like the past 3, 4, 5 years, but right now it's just like become so evident for me. Maybe this also connects to like when I first got here, and like my first experience of the United States was downtown LA. So maybe for the audience who don't know, like downtown LA is generally where you don't want to be because of like safety issues and infrastructure issues and everything really issues. But from my experience, because before the US, I've only been to like Europe and the Middle East and stuff. So I've that where you go is to stay as a tourist or not is downtown. And I just booked my Airbnb in downtown just because that's usually what you do, and it's supposedly close to everything. But yeah, and then my intro to downtown LA, even I remember the Uber driver was like, "Are you sure you're that I should drop you off here?" Like, and it wasn't like Skid Row; it was like South Broadway, so it wasn't like the most like sketchy area, but it was still like I remember just like looking around and feeling like something is wrong. And yeah, and then just like 2, 3, 4 months later, I realized what really America is, and I understood like writers who call it like a second world country, not necessarily a first world country. That is coupled with the rise of the right, of course, and that is happening very much in Europe as much as it is happening here. And that on like historically on an economic level does not really fare well. So usually also indicative of a lesser education level. So I feel like things in the West are just like shifting away in terms of like the place to be, because when we were talking about the avant-garde and why I did post, and part of why I came to LA was like I was enamored with this idea of finding the avant-garde and finding the group of people in the community that is on that front line, and just like, this is where I need to be because this is where everyone is. And I think this is still definitely true in LA and New York especially, but I think that is very quickly shifting east, basically. And I think why I want more people to pay attention to that is also for selfish reasons, because I want to know more about the shifts that's happening, so I can make like better informed decisions in my own life, of where I want to be. So I just feel like this needs to be studied more and just like paid attention more to. And we've seen Zizek, and I think it was a recent, like maybe 3 months ago, just going on in a rant about Europe is over. The war on Gaza was the end of Europe. Everything we stood for is now over, blah, blah, blah. And so, yeah, I think it's about time to kind of like reconsider what the West is until maybe it fixes itself. But yeah, it's not looking like it's going to be what it was, And I even remember I was speaking with one of my friends. He lives in London, and we were connecting after like a bunch of years of not talking, and he was asking me, so you're thinking about no, he was telling me he was asking a friend of his if he's thinking about like getting a green card and American citizenship and so on. And he said that guy told him, no, it's not the 80s anymore. And he was also considering leaving and so on. So I feel like that is a vibe right now. And usually vibes become material in the span of like 3 to 5 years. Yeah.
So you're basing this is like, because there's a lot of obviously like the whole geopolitical angle around BRICS and, a lot of like jockeying around, the currency of record. There's that whole thing.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you're describing a kind of like cultural, social, political, maybe rot is too strong of a word, but but a sort of decay or a degradation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, but I think it's like what I'm seeing more is not the cultural decay, that is definitely there, but I'm seeing more of like an everyday life kind of decay, like quality of life. The quality of food in the U.S. is extremely questionable. Like a lot of reports recently coming out of like how many of the food products that are here that are banned everywhere else in the world, and there's like massive unregulation, and it's very ingrained in a lot of policy. So unregulation is not necessarily only on food, but it's just like there seems to be like a change in policy, like an accumulation of changes in policy that allowed a lot of exploitation to happen here and in Europe, and maybe here more than Europe, that are causing a lot of these kind of, it doesn't make sense to be here kind of scenarios. So, and just on like an everyday life kind of thing without even considering culture or anything. Yeah.
Neoliberalism.
Yep.
Messed everything up.
Yep. Reagan.
Thanks,
Thank
Reagan.
you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's fascinating. What is one resource you would recommend or that you use for making better sense of reality?
Urgent Futures podcast.
That you can't.
I mean, I don't want to sound cheesy, but usually the things that help me view reality in like a healthier way is usually the offline world. And I'm talking like coming here, I took an Uber. It was a Chinese 30-year-old who was telling me a story of how he got really rich trading stocks and just blew all his money, and now he has to Uber. and we had a lot of conversation, and we followed each other on Twitter, and like it was very kind of insightful in terms of like he was pretty much apolitical, but his ideas, especially like on stock market and how things change, and he talks about BlackRock, he talks about Vanguard, which are very like buzzwords right now in like political discourse, but his understanding of them was coming from a much more kind of like apolitical, educated kind of place. So he was like, no, but BlackRock are doing X and Y and Z, like a lot of technical terms. Of course, I do not remember it now, but like it helped me see like, you know, a certain dimension that I've viewed in a way that was like, it's just like these morally corrupt oligarchy controlling everything. But the view from his reality, which is way more kind of like involved in it and more of like a lived experience, is that it's still somewhat of a functioning system. Like it's not completely broken. It's like it's got its own rules, and that makes me think, okay, so the world is not necessarily ending tomorrow, but maybe that system breaks down in 2 years, so the world ends in 2 years. So that's kind of like what I mean by, of course I'm exaggerating, but yeah, I think in terms of like resource, touch grass and go outside, and that's why I said I didn't want to be cheesy, but yeah, it's like be offline. Maybe that's like a good resource for making sense of reality. And I'm right now reading Baudrillard's America. I didn't want to read it once I got here. I said I'm gonna wait for a couple of years and then read it. And it's pretty insightful in terms of like reading his words. I'm going like, yeah, I said that. Yeah. So he's like, he has like, again, like an outsider perspective on a lot of things in America, but they're very similar to, I think, whoever comes here it's kind of like relevant in that sense, that that's why I guess it hasn't lost its relevance.
Yeah, Baudrillard's making a comeback.
Yeah.
You're hearing a lot more about Baudrillard.
Yep. Thanks to the internet also for his comeback.
Right. So get offline, go online, get offline, go on. And finally, what is one moment when your sense of reality was disrupted?
I think this happens every day now, like with the pace of events. But if we go back to the moment, I talked about the graffiti in downtown. I think that was one of those moments where I had some kind of sense of reality that it was like we're all in this together, comrades kind of sense of reality. And then it became more of like wait a minute, what I don't think I fully understand what's happening kind of moment. Another moment actually, so do you know Face Gym?
Mm-mm.
They're like I'm gonna be doing an ad here. So they're it's basically like you're going to get your haircut or you're going for a workout, but it's for your face. So you basically go, and then they just do a lot of like slappy stuff on your face, and then your face looks better after it. They drain all like the puffiness, so you're like more defined. It's like a Madonna Instagram filter, but in real life. And the first time I went, I didn't think it worked, and then it worked, and I was like, wow, okay. But yeah, so maybe 2 days ago, I was checking their Instagram because I was thinking of going again, and I saw that like you see the mutuals on the profile. I saw that one of the people who were following them was Bisan, like from Gaza, and I think it was maybe like 7 others. So it wasn't like a super famous account. It's not like The Rock's Instagram where everyone would be following it, but it was, and I think also that stopped me for a moment because I was questioning why was I stopped? Like it shouldn't be not normal that she's following Face Gym because their content is just like, face massage. but because of what's been allowed to happen for so long, it just shaped this reality that somehow this has always been going on, and this is just reality. So you start thinking that this person's whole identity is that kind of impromptu journalist survivor who's live streaming the worst moments of like human history in the recent kind of century, the last century. I don't know. It felt like an insane moment where to just like to see that those two worlds intersect in that very weird space. Because usually Instagram mutuals, it's like whenever you view an account, you see like the same more or less, mutuals, and you kind of expect that this person is following that person, and you kind of expect, the algorithmic bubbles to work in their ways. But that was kind of like a moment that stopped me. Yeah, it made me really also again think of like how bad things have gotten in terms of the end of the world kind of scenarios of I didn't want to end on such a low note, like on a bad thing. No, so we can maybe I don't know, have some tequila shots or something.
Cut to. No, that's, I mean, I definitely experienced that in my experience online as well, where you need to compartmentalize.
Yeah.
Like there's so much information that you implicitly compartmentalize people. And especially something as, devastating and atrocious as what's happening in Gaza, your brain disallows you from thinking about what the like cosmetic appreciation of the sort of people regarded as figureheads or spokespeople or journalists might have.
Yeah.
So it makes a lot of sense. Well, I guess, phasing in hopeful, looking to the future directions. Yeah. You referenced a new volume of the book. Yeah. Tell us about that, and then also anything else you have.
The new book is supposed to be a much more like kind of dramatic move. Like it's there are a bunch of a lot of actually contributors in mind. A lot of contributors who have reached out after the first one. To quote Julia Fox, I don't want to give too much away because I'm very superstitious. I think we're pretty excited for it. We're gonna have like, it's gonna be Roba and I and more like people on the curation end, and then we're gonna have a lot more like contributors and a lot of other pieces. We're thinking probably a tentative release date by maybe March.
Nice.
But it might end up being in the summer. So again, it's we're also approaching it from a pretty kind of chill space. So not pushing anything.
One other thing you brought up that I can't not ask before we go. I know Julia Fox has been like a big figure in Post. What is it that you like about Julia Fox's presence online, or what resonates with you?
I think she's such a an amazing celebrity with a great kind of like pull. Like, now people say like the feed pull, even as a thing. So I think she's always been that kind of like magnetic, weird enough kind of figure. And again, it's also approached from that kind of meta-ironic kind of stance. And maybe when I started posting Julia Fox, I haven't seen a lot of other kind of like meme places post about Julia Fox, but I think she's now like the poster child of meme accounts and stuff. So I think she's, and she just basically says everything that Post wants to say, but in a much kind of cooler, hotter way. So yeah, why not utilize that?
Well, shout out Julia Fox. Yeah. On that note, Al, thank you so much for being on Urgent Futures.
This was great.
And any other places people can find you?
I mean, the Instagram and postpostpost.com. you can buy the publication, and yeah,
do it.
perfect.
Go buy the book.
Yeah,
All right. Thank you again.
yeah, it was great.
This podcast is edited and produced by Adam Labrie and me, Jesse Damiani. The podcast is presented by Reality Studies. You can learn more by visiting realitystudies.co. And if you appreciate the work I'm doing, please subscribe and share it with someone you think would enjoy it.